Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Star Wars. You heard me. I am Star Wars. A few days ago, and by few days ago I mean I guess a few weeks at this point, I'm sorry for going on like a break that was supposed to be like a week, and the break ended up being like 3 weeks or something like that. I'm sorry about that. We're supposedly getting back on the grind by now, hopefully. I say this with no videos in my backlog, so we'll see how well that goes. But a few weeks ago, I should say, I watched Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. And, I went into the theaters, watched it, left, and sort of looked to see what the other receptions to Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker is. And to say the least, it's very mixed. It's a very mixed environment out there as to how people feel about The Rise of Skywalker. There are people who are saying they hate it, there are people saying they love it, there are people that say it's worse than The Last Jedi. So I figured I will throw out my voice into the void just like everyone else and give my thoughts on The Rise of Skywalker. And you can probably figure out what my thoughts are by the title. In fact, I'm not really going to focus on my personal review of the movie as a whole, but look at it through an analysis comparing it to The Last Jedi, because I've seen a lot of people say that this movie is worse than The Last Jedi, and what is all I can say. The Last Jedi... Okay, where do we want to start? The defense I see people make of The Last Jedi, saying that, Rise of Skywalker is worse than The Last Jedi, and these aren't necessarily Last Jedi fans that are saying this. These are people who already hated Last Jedi, saying that Rise of Skywalker is worse than Last Jedi. But they will say, at least Last Jedi was a movie. Like, it had a message, it had a proper theme, while Rise of Skywalker comparatively didn't really have that. I want to say something that I think is that a lot of people overvalue when analyzing film or fiction. I think people think that theme is more important than it actually is. Because themes and messages, I should say. In your English class in high school, you might be told your story isn't a story if it doesn't have a central theme and maybe some other themes running alongside of that. But I don't think a good theme, even if that theme is conveyed well, that necessarily makes for a good piece of fiction, for a good story. The fact that the boat's about to make its horn, so if you hear a loud horn noise, I apologize. But the fact of the matter is, there are an unlimited amount of stories you can tell, but there is a limited amount of themes. And by this point in time, with the history of writing and as many themes as there are, every theme has been explored in some way, shape, or form. Themes can... Basically, if theme was so central and core to fiction as, traditional academia might make it out to be, then nothing good, fiction-wise, could have come out since maybe the Roman imperial days, Sort of around that point is where we've explored most themes. In writing, at least. So, if you think about it that way, theme doesn't really matter. You can tell a good story without even really having any themes. There goes the boat. So, you can tell a good story without any themes. You can tell a good story without themes, but you can't convey a theme without a good story. Last Jedi had stronger themes than The Rise of Skywalker. It conveyed them more clearly than Rise of Skywalker. But that doesn't mean The Last Jedi was a good story. And I think as time goes on, we need to become more aware of two different types of storytelling that's really kicking up as people are getting more into this style of fiction. It's becoming more mainstream. The sort of shared universe style of writing, and the legacy style of writing. As we're having all these films that are set in shared universes. We're having all these films that are springboarding off of nostalgia properties, because nostalgia sells right now. Or rather, it kind of always has sold. But, so, the appeal of a story that's part of a shared universe and is part of a legacy nostalgia thing isn't the same thing as any other normal fiction writing. What I mean by this is when you write something like this, the purpose of the fiction is a different experiment than other forms of writing, as in, part of the purpose of writing this story is to expand a universe that's already been established. Part of the purpose is to provide a general audience, not more of a specific audience, but a general audience, a continuation or reimagining of something they already like, and keeping the stuff they like, only making changes with the intention to improve stuff, built upon stuff you know they already like. Star Wars is set both in a shared universe, in the sense that there are multiple films and multiple pieces of fiction written by multiple authors, and it is the current, or I guess the trilogy that just ended, is a nostalgia title. It's a legacy title. So, The Last Jedi and its themes of throwing away the past, and its writing style of telling a very contained, small in the grand scheme of things story in a main trilogy. The trilogies are the flagships for the entire universe, but telling a small, contained story that's small in the grand scheme of things in a trilogy. Both of those don't work well in the shared universe media and in the nostalgia wave media. It really goes against all that. And I'd say, oh, Rian Johnson's like, he had the story he wanted to tell. When you're writing for something like this, it doesn't matter what story you want to tell. If you want to tell a story, do an original movie. But when you're like part of a legacy and part of a shared universe, you become another cog in a greater machine to sort of expand and build up that universe. It's not about you. That's really the main point of writing in a nostalgia wave or a shared universe. It's not about you. Most people watching the film aren't watching for you, and they're not interested in your narrative and interested in your history as a filmmaker. They're interested in seeing the continuation of characters they loved since they were children. They're interested in seeing a universe expand that has some other plot elements, other stories that they really like, and want to see how that universe continues and expands. And I think the attitude that, writing in a shared universe and writing in a legacy title, a legacy franchise, is the same thing as writing anything else of fiction, any other fictional story. I think that idea has been prominent, especially what I have in my head right now is I'm thinking about comics. People who, like, for example, take the Batman character, or it might be safer to say Superman character, judging by Brian Michael Bendis' run on Superman so far. But ultimately, it's not about the story you want to tell. It's about what do you have to offer this universe, if that makes sense. Not saying that, let's say Last Jedi was a completely different movie. Well, let's say Last Jedi had it wasn't set in Star Wars, it was a generic science fiction universe with characters that weren't named Luke Skywalker and stuff like that. Original characters. I would say Last Jedi might be a good... I'm hesitant to say that, to be honest. But it wouldn't have been as bad if it was outside of Star Wars. And people will say, oh, that's not how fiction works. That's exactly how fiction works. When we need to understand a new branch of fiction, and that is the shared universe and the nostalgia wave. I think we are looking at those stuff through the same lens as other forms of fiction is not helpful to how unique this genre is. And it is a unique situation. Like, say you're doing it for like, oh, I'm a filmmaker, I expect these people to be interested in me. Well, part of making films is getting the audience. Part of making films is like building up that fan base. When you're going into a legacy or a shared universe, you already have a pre-built fan base. So you didn't earn this fan base. if you're working on something original, then you earn that fan base, but you don't earn that fan base when you write in a shared universe or a legacy title. You are picking up where someone else left off. You have sort of more responsibilities and duties to fulfill for that audience than you would when you're running your own original story. And just because of how different of a headspace the writer has to be in to write for something like that compared to their own original work, I think warrants it being viewed through a different lens. So that's why I think the whole Star Wars Last Jedi had themes and stuff. It works better as a movie than Rise of Skywalker, and therefore Last Jedi is better than Rise of Skywalker. I don't think that's a legitimate argument. Maybe if we're looking at it straight, like maybe you would have a point if Last Jedi was like I said, not set in Star Wars and was different characters. Maybe it might even be a parody or critique or satire of Star Wars itself, and it would be good. But being actually Star Wars' second film in a major trilogy, that it's not in the right context for that story. Now, I want to be clear that this isn't necessarily a defense of The Rise of Skywalker. If you want to know my opinions of The Rise of Skywalker, ultimately I went into the movie with zero expectations, maybe even negative expectations. And what I got was a stupid movie that really doesn't make sense the more you think about it. But I do think it was more fun than The Last Jedi. I feel like it wasn't made to sort of slap you in the face like The Last Jedi was, and because of that I can respect it a little bit more than The Last Jedi. I do think it was more scatterbrained, didn't have a cohesive plot like The Last Jedi, but again, I don't feel like it was sort of mean-spirited. So, like, do you want, like, an ADHD friend who doesn't know what he's doing, or do you want, like, a very clear and concise person to slap you in the face? I'd rather have the ADHD friend. But, yeah. I think going in with low expectations definitely helped me have a more positive outlook on the movie. I don't think it's a good movie, but I did enjoy it, which kind of puts it in the category of most of the Michael Bay Transformer movies for me. I don't think it's I think it's a bad movie, but I still enjoyed it. But I understand why a lot of people aren't liking it as much. Especially when you're more of a Star Wars fan, you had more expectations, and you might be more invested in the more expanded universe. I can see why there's such a negative feedback, but I do not accept the idea that this is worse than The Last Jedi. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to support this channel, consider supporting me on Patreon. The link to that's in the description. All my social media is in the description as well. Subscribe to this channel if you have not yet. We do a lot of nerdy stuff on this channel. I just put out a very sarcastic review of the Joker movie, where I just sort of deconstructed the "we live in a society" meme. So check that out. Link to that will be in the description. And yeah, have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. Huge thanks to our patrons, including this month's $10 plus patron, Josh Adkins. Check out the description for more patrons and more info about how you can receive a shout out here.